This morning I'm planting carrots, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about it and show you just how I do it. A lot of people do have difficulties growing carrots, and really it doesn't need to be difficult. It can be really simple. I've developed this method over the last couple of years and have found that it works so easy to get really good germination and to grow really nice carrots. It's a no-dig method, so the first thing that I do is to just clear the area of the previous crop and any weeds that are growing. Once I've done that, I put a generous layer of compost on. Now what I use is a green waste compost. If you have your own compost, use that, but you do want a compost that it doesn't have any seeds in it and isn't going to germinate anything, because you don't want competition for your carrots. So if you have a cold compost, I wouldn't recommend using that, because you probably get a lot of seeds coming up and a lot of competition. How much do you need? I probably used a bit more than I need, but you probably need at least about 2 inches or 50 millimeters of cover. That way you're really going to hide any seeds that exist in the bed, and so it's going to slow the weed growth. Now, I'm using a garden bed, so the soil already has nice depth to it and is good topsoil, but it hasn't been loosened. I haven't dug it to loosen it at all, and you don't actually need to do that if you have a good garden bed. A flower?
Yeah, it tastes delicious.
Oh, do you want me to taste it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Samuel.
It's yum.
Yeah, it is yum.
Yeah, you can eat them.
Now, the variety I'm using is early Nantes. I've used this variety for a couple of years and find that it's really good, a really nice carrot, and here in our climate it will actually overwinter successfully and still be able to pull it in spring. So I only actually plant carrots generally once a year. I don't plant them successively because I plant enough and just keep on harvesting them. But you can plant a later crop if you like. It's entirely up to you, depending on how many carrots you actually use. Now, when it comes to putting the seed in, I use an old paling simply as a guide, and I like the Homey to put in a furrow, but you can use anything, even your finger, if you've got nothing else. Simply a matter of making a shallow furrow there in the compost, and I'm using the paling not just only as a guide to keep it straight, but I will use it also for the spacing of the carrots. So slipping him back in, and so that will then be the distance between the two rows, or between each row should I say. By keeping them fairly close together like this, it means that you're completely overshadowing any weeds that might grow. So there's not going to be any competition. Once they come up to around about 6 inches, they're going to completely cover the ground. So you can keep sliding that on and doing more rows.
That thing, wonder why that thing like that then look like the bread for cars to go over the cars go under it. Which one are you opening? Carrots first. My hand.
Oh, we haven't got seed yet.
Oh.
So once you have the rows in, it's time to put the seed, because compost, some rows and seed and water, that's all you're doing. You excited, Samuel?
Yes. Why?
Now, these are very small seed and they have to go in the row. So,
Wow.
I'm going to put very few in your hand.
Wow. You're right, they are.
Very small ones. He's going to put them into his hand.
I put them in there.
Find the easiest way is just to put them in the palm of your hand, and then take a pinch and sprinkle. Thank you, Samuel. Be careful with them. Now,
not very good at them getting.
Try and sprinkle them evenly and not excessively.
Not so good at putting them in the line.
I prefer not to come back and thin, so simply getting them in at sparse spacing, but still you're going to have some clumps because it's not possible to avoid that when you're putting them in this way. You could use the sand technique to spread your seed, but I don't find it's really worth the time. I find that doing it this way works just as well and will still give you nice big carrots. Once you have the seed in, it's time to water them. Now with the carrots, I don't cover them. Watering them in itself with this depth of furrow will actually cover the seeds quite effectively, and with this nice light compost they will still find their way out perfectly well. The compost will keep them nice and moist, whereas if you put them into soil it does tend to dry out because they're so close to the surface, and that interferes with your germination. You can plant beetroot much the same way, but with beetroot you probably best to cover it. I generally water once a day, and the evening is the best because they stay nice and moist overnight. And within 7 to 10 days they'll germinate and you'll start to see them coming through. Of course, keep them nice and moist until they're growing strongly. In Tasmania and in climates that are similar, that are cool but not extremely cold, over winter you can keep carrots in the ground very successfully. This carrot has spent all winter in the ground, and you will see, yes, a little bit of where something is chewed at the bottom, but essentially the carrot is still really good. But as spring starts to come along, the tops will begin to grow again and vitality starts to flow from the carrot. Now what will happen is that if you leave that, is that the carrots will come up to seed, the carrot itself will become quite woody and lose its sweetness and not really nice to eat anymore. So to actually keep these carrots longer, even though they've been basically sitting in cool storage in the ground for 3 or 4 months, but to keep them longer they now need to come out of the ground. Now there's a couple of things that you can do to actually keep the carrots longer again once they're out of the ground. One is to pack them in sand, but my experience is sand packing works provided you actually can keep it quite cool. Now I don't really have anywhere that I can do that. If I had a root cellar that would be ideal, and one day I'll build one of those and then I could do that. Packing them into a crisper in the fridge, they will keep quite a long time, but still to get through long-term storage you need to do something else. One option is to dry them, so you can slice them up and dry them and they will keep, indefinitely. But dried carrots only have a limited degree of use, so my preference is to pickle them. The process we use to pickle these carrots is a fairly simple one. First, of course, washing them thoroughly, then chopping them up fairly coarsely, before putting them into a pot of salty water to soak overnight. Once they have soaked, of course they need to be drained and rinsed very well. Then using the Vicola bottles, the same as we would use for fruit, put a little bit of water in the bottom, then add the carrots to the bottle, then adding some spices. Basically it can be your choice as to how spicy you like them, and a little bit of sweetening. We use some xylitol. And then top this off with a good quality vinegar. We use an apple cider vinegar. Then we process them in the Vicola unit the same way as we would fruit. When they come out, they look really nice and they keep really well, at least for 12 months or more, and are really quite tasty on the plate. Of course, we're not so used to pickled carrots. It's not a common thing, more used to pickled cucumbers, but carrots taste just fine too.